Hi, welcome to the Trax Retail Renaissance. We're excited for you to join us today for this exciting event. I'm Jennifer Foreman, and I'll be your MC for today. As we have a few people logging on, I want to cover a few housekeeping items before we begin. All of our attendees are currently muted and will not be able to speak to us during the event. However, we do have a live Q&A at the end. You'll see a widget on the right-hand side of your screen that gives you the ability to ask questions in the Q&A function. There's also a polling area. We will be popping up some polls later on in the event. If you'd like to participate in the poll, you can access the questions there. You also have the ability to like any comments from our panelists today. Today we have an exciting agenda hosted by our very special guest, Richard Quest, anchor of CNN's Quest Means Business. Following the opening remarks by Richard and Trax CEO Justin Bihar, Richard will host an interactive panel with experts in retail and consumer goods, including James McCann of Food Ventures, Sue Toy from Tyson, Paul DeHartog from Unilever, Ivan Barton from Beiersdorf, Carrie Tharp from Google Cloud, and Jill Kress from PayPal. Then we'll ask you, our audience, for your thoughts in a quick poll that will show up on your screen while we're taking a quick transition into a fireside chat that's an in-depth conversation with Richard Quest and Justin Bihar, our Trax CEO. Thank you so much for joining. We're delighted to begin. Over to you, Richard.
Hello, and welcome to the Retail Renaissance virtual event. I'm Richard Quest of CNN, the anchor of Quest Means Business and CNN Business Traveller. For more than 3 decades, I've been covering the global economy and learned the significance of retailing as a cornerstone of global growth. So today we're going to be looking at the role of consumer brands and grocery brands and the massive change that's taking place at the moment. We can put at its core the principle of delight at shelf, that experience that consumers have when they go in front of your product and make that decision to buy. Success has always been about delighting the consumers, the customers, those people standing in front of your product. There are more ways than ever. You're going to hear the phrase omni-channel. It's a long word with a difficult meaning and a revolutionary overtone. But it is here, and as you're going to hear today, you ignore it at your peril and you fail to grasp it and manage it at your disaster. For instance, let's look at this survey of more than 14,000 consumers that forecasted changes in purchasing behavior. 52% of shoppers say they plan to shop online more this year than they did before the pandemic. Now, that might not be surprising. One of the things we know about the pandemic is that we're all shopping more online. But how does online and bricks and mortar interact in that environment? Well, the reality is, and this is the sad fact, that bricks and mortar has often been found wanting during the disruption of the pandemic. Even though a majority of people say that they will make the majority of purchases in bricks and mortar stores, there's still been major problems, particularly failure in the supply chain, out of stock, a retailing experience that has left consumers wanting and has only boosted the call for these other omni-channels, which is why we're talking about it today. The reality is what McKinsey terms a quickening has taken place. I call it an acceleration. It was already happening before the pandemic came along, but things that are now taking place at a much faster pace, an increase in technology, in the use of different solutions, augmented reality, machine learning, artificial intelligence. Before the pandemic, we used to talk about these things. We used to all say the 4th industrial revolution was coming. Well, it came, and now we're on to the 5th industrial revolution, for whatever that might bring. And that is why understanding what this quickening is about is crucial. For instance, 60% of consumers also said they'd be willing to shift their purchases away from those retailers not using automation. The message could not be clearer. Data is what this is all about. Having the information, as I've been giving you just in this short introduction of how to move forward. When you look at the totality of what's been happening with retail over the last 12 months, obviously with pandemic, but even further out, 18 months, 24 months, as we came into this with the Industrial Revolution, fourth and fifth Industrial Revolution, you start to see how bricks and mortar has been challenged in its attempt to delight the customer, delight at the shelf. Failure to keep up, failure to have right product, disappointment in the consumer. Not always, to be sure, but now is the time to fight back. And according to the National Retail Federation, the change in supply and retail supply chains has been nothing short of revolutionary. The e-commerce necessary to reach shoppers. We have buy online, pick up in store, click and collect. Last year alone, click and collect sales grew by 107%. But what does that mean for the bricks and mortar retailer? And that is why it's important for us to understand where we are and where we are going. First of all, what is the current state of play? What does the marketplace actually look like? What's happening right now? And once we've established the landscape, then we need to know, how do you navigate it? What is the way forward? The pitfalls, the successes, what works and what doesn't. And finally, the technology and the innovation that you'll need for a digital transformation. We need to put that on top of this pyramid. We're building up a picture of what the market is like, where it is going, and what you need to succeed. And our panel is uniquely qualified to discuss this. James McCann is the CEO of Food Tech Ventures, former CEO of Ahold USA, and Executive Director of France Carrefour. Paul de Hartog is the Global Sales Execution Director at Unilever. Sue Toy is the Vice President of Category and Shopper Leadership at Tyson Foods. Ivan Barton is Vice President Sales and Emerging Markets at Beiersdorf. Carrie Tharp is the Vice President of Retail and Consumer at Google Cloud Partners. And Jill Kress is the Lead Consumer Marketing at PayPal. Following our discussion, we'll be joined by Justin Bihar, the CEO of Trax, who will have a fireside chat. We'll pull together the strands of everything we've learned during the course of the discussion. First, here's Justin to give us an overview and an introduction.
Thank you, Richard. It's a privilege to have you lead this discussion. Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Bihar, and I'm the CEO of Trax Retail. You're going to be hearing the word transformation a lot in this conversation, and for good reason. CPG brand manufacturers and retailers have begun a journey of inescapable velocity in response to this rapidly changing retail environment. At Trax, we're honored to work with many of the world's largest and most well-known brands and retailers across the globe. And we've had a front row seat for almost a decade now to the challenges and strategies that are winning at the shelf. And I have to say that if you don't have a clear path towards how you're approaching this digital transformation for the immediate future, meaning the next 2 to 3 years, then you may very well be behind. And that's just skimming the surface of the transformation wave that's running over retail today. I wanted to share a few data points as context for this overall transformation. The timing of transformation, the timing of disruption at least, is now. There's greater variety, expedience, and convenience in retail than has ever existed before. And with those choices of where and when and how to shop, the consumer mindset is shifting and shifting rapidly. And they expect a whole range of new experiences in store that are tailored to meet their needs. And so the time to change is very much now. I'd like to share a few data points from some of our own research on this, which is about 60% of shoppers say the pandemic has forever changed their shopping habits. The majority saying that they will always stock up on essentials, close to 70%. Yet, despite this major uptick in online shopping popularity that's come over the last 12 months because of COVID, consumers still, on a majority basis, expect to do most of their shopping in physical stores. And that's for both non-essential and essential items that they were previously buying online in 2021. Second point worth noting is the shifting mindsets and expectations that the retail industry faces is really how to respond to the needs of the modern shopper while also winning at the shelf consistently. Again, a whole range of new shopping experiences of e-commerce, social commerce, private shopping services, all add a new layer of complexity for retailers and brands. This last year, the trend of buy online and pick up in store really permanently changed retail. It encompasses curbside pickup, but also shipped directly from store, which is a relatively new option to get the items quickly to your home, sometimes within a few hours, using the nearest store location rather than from a warehouse. And with these unexpected consumer demands, it really is driving a whole new wave of fulfillment agility required to respond to these market expectations. Again, another data point, consumers tried out different options for pickup for essentials, and 55% of them now say that buy online and pickup to varying degrees will be a core part of their shopping behavior going forward. Even when life returns to normal, which whatever that normal is, 44% of consumers hope that curbside pickup will remain a core option for them in their shopping. With the role of stores profoundly challenged, digital technologies are necessary to augment the physical experience in store. So CPG manufacturers and grocery retailers really need solutions to understand what's truly happening at the shelf in every store in real time, so that they can use that to deliver significantly better shopping experiences without sacrificing margin. Finally, the store of tomorrow will reimagine how brands and retailers engage with consumers in new and totally unexpected and, I believe, very exciting ways. Long-standing ways of managing retail execution and driving shopper behaviors in store needs to be reimagined to keep pace with this changing landscape. For example, there are a host of digital-first shopper engagement applications that are meant to boost brand engagement, drive loyalty, increase sales conversion, but to do that in physical retail, leveraging a digital-first experience. Additionally, retailers can leverage a new innovation of autonomous solutions that are installed in store to measure execution standards in real time and fix gaps at the shelf before they become a problem for shoppers. And finally, there's a new wave of AI-driven flexible workforces that are elastically available for brands and retailers to better execute and respond to retail conditions so that they can have the right on-shelf experience, the right availability of products, the right promotion that meet and exceed the shopper experience. So our vision at Trax is to be the driving force of the store of tomorrow, where the physical and digital combine in new ways to delight at the shelf. We're very proud to be leading this discussion around the rebirth of retail together with our industry partners. And I'm excited to begin this conversation with the bright minds of our panelists here today.
Thanks, Justin, and thanks, Richard. Now at this time, we're going to move on to our interactive panel discussion hosted by Richard Quest. Thank you so much.
So, warm welcome to our panel discussion. We have an extremely august group with us today to discuss what's happening. James McCann is with us. He is the CEO of Food Tech Ventures. It's good to have you with us, James. Paul de Hartog is with us, the Global Execution Director for Unilever. Sue Toy is the President of Category and Shopper Leadership at Tyson. Give us a wave, and we'll be able to recognize who everybody is. Ivan Barton joins us from Beiersdorf, the Vice President of Sales at Emerging Markets. Carrie Tharp is the VP of Retail and Consumer at Google Cloud with Google, and Jill Kress is the Lead Consumer Marketing at PayPal. Well, I told the panel in advance of our discussion, we've got about an hour, 50 minutes to an hour. Jump in when you want to. This is a free-for-all. You each individually bring a different area of experience into this industry that complements rather than competes against each other, and therefore we want to hear about it. Well, the revolution, we're in the middle of it. It's swirling around us at the moment. But how far do you think we've got to go? Or I think one of the big questions is the disruption here to stay?
Yeah, so I think a lot of things changed during the COVID pandemic, but not necessarily were it all new events. I would actually say that it was more a case of things accelerating during COVID. We already talked about the channel shift. The penetration for online groceries grew in the first 8 months of the pandemic as much as the 10 years before. So it's a matter of acceleration, not necessarily a matter of drastic change. And I don't think that those changes will actually ever stop.
I'll turn to Ivan. First of all, describe to me where you saw the disruption.
I think it happened on different levels. I'm talking from an emerging market perspective. There was an acceleration, as Paul said, but there was almost a step back. Is things we've taken for granted for the last 20, 30 years, the ability to deliver to store, the ability to get product into cities, disappeared with very harsh lockdowns, particularly in India being probably the prime example, but Latin America as well. So we almost had to take one step back, get the basics in place of how we service our DCs, how we service the customers, and simultaneously take the steps forward that Paul said of how we react to the change in formats, how we react to the fast move online, which happened in all markets, by the way, not just developed markets, and also how we reacted to the emergence of these new formats, the last milers that suddenly popped up and became quite a compelling trade partner.
As we saw that move come forward, so you've given me one important side to that, which is the supply chain to the retailer that is severely disrupted as a result. But Carrie, whilst that is going on, whilst that sort of traditional distribution line is going on, we have this dramatic increase in online, which almost overwhelms at the same time.
Absolutely. There's been this accelerated shift, as we're all talking about, and really customer expectations have fundamentally changed. And the data in this part of the story is what's really exciting at this time in retail. So how do you take all of the data that's being cast off from these digital interactions and begin to merge it with more data coming out of the stores? And so focusing on the ability to bring customer, product, and supply chain data together to create these new experiences and drive improved business performance.
So this is the scenario that we are in, Jill. This is the absolute environment under which we sort of muddle our way through last year. You have traditional retailers either locked down and closed, but anyway, having supply chain issues. You have online thrusting forward. And now we have to somehow have this hybrid coming together. So from what you're seeing, I'm going to move us forward as to what we need to do next. But from what you're seeing, Jill, where does this leave us, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is no doubt that the pandemic supercharged this shift from physical to digital. You referenced McKinsey earlier, and they will share that we saw 10 years of growth in 3 months as COVID took hold. And so as we look at all of these trends, I think, as we've already teed up, the one thing that we can be absolutely certain of is that we will have to be able to delight consumers and meet them and give them those choices of how, when, and where they want to shop. And so at PayPal and Venmo, we look at the two-sided stakeholders in our network, the 370 million consumers. Yeah.
Right. Sorry, forgive me. I want to jump in because I'm aware that the viewers with us sort of are well familiar with that. But how do you then delight? Surely we can only delight if we first of all ask ourselves, where were we found wanting in the first place?
Love it. Okay, so for us, that meant looking at new ways to meet the consumer and provide new solutions to our merchant partners. So there were two big areas of focus and things that we'll continue to deliver on. PayPal and Venmo were digital first brands. So it actually created an opportunity for us to augment our solutions by creating safe opportunities for consumers to shop in store. So that was new for us. And we did that through the PayPal and Venmo apps by adding increased functionality to make that experience in store similar to the digital experience that they have offline with us. Online with us. And so that was all about implementing QR code functionality in our app so that consumers could start to check out in a seamless fashion in store, just as they've done online. So you simply open up your PayPal or Venmo app and you open up a QR code that allows you to really control that experience through your own device in your own hand. And that was critical as consumers were anticipating risk of shopping.
So you have these big industries like retailers. When I say hubris or arrogance or overconfidence, we thought we knew how to do it. We thought we were managing a transition from bricks and mortar to online. And suddenly, you know the old line, if you want to give God a good laugh, tell him your plans.
That's for sure. I'll tell you what we're trying to experience real time is this idea of all the different types of shoppers. And I think we alluded to that a little bit, right? We've got to meet the needs of the shoppers in store, but the pickers who are shoppers as well, and making their experience better and more efficient for all of us. And then that online shopper. But at the end of the day, you're right. I mean, there's disruption all over the place. And for us at Tyson and my function, we are all about trying to provide solutions and opportunities for retailers so that we can kind of jointly tackle some of the problems and set them apart, right? We're trying to figure out ways to set them apart from everyone else.
Okay, I need you to take one step further forward now. We're a year into this. What have you learned that you're now putting in place?
Well, for sure, we've learned how to speed to insights. We've learned, right? We can't wait for long research studies to come back. I mean, we have learned how to move with speed around talking to shoppers and trying to figure out what they need from us now, what they will need, right? And then it's pulse much more rapid types of insights. So that's one thing that we learned moving on. But some of the activation and some of the technology is just continuing to make sure that we make shopping easier. We find ways to make shopping easier. So we're doing that. Trax is a great partner with us on trying to find solutions around that. I mean, there have been a lot of ways, right, through purchases. I'm looking at Jay, like decision trees and purchase structures and trying to find great merchandising conditions and guidelines. But there's just more technology coming in that will really help us set the way for what we need to do moving forward.
Yes, go ahead. Jay.
I think on the speed, Sarah's going to jump in on the speed of insights. What we've seen is that when we create seamless solutions for consumers, adoption happens incredibly quickly. So this example of enabling consumers to pay with their phones through QR codes, we launched this in fourth quarter of last year. We brought on 600,000 merchants and we had 10 million consumers try to shop with QR codes in fourth quarter of last year. That's pretty rapid adoption. And they spend over $20 billion using that technology that sits within their phone at those 600,000 merchants that we brought up. So I think seamless solutions for consumers drive to really rapid adoption, and understanding how they're using that and where that goes is an important part of where we focus.
So you've heard what the people are saying. From Food Tech Ventures, the view of disruption, who were the winners? We know were online, but how far was bricks and mortars? Were they losers?
The first question you asked me was, where are we on the journey? The truth is, we're just at the very beginning of the journey. And the reason for that is what is happening now to the retail industry, and by the way, is happening to all other industry verticals, is that technology is beginning to impact us in a very meaningful way. And just like the semiconductor chips in the 60s started to evolve, with Moore's law, we're now finding that across 14 major technology shifts, all happening at the same time. So, vision and AI, which is where Trax plays, is is actually two of those 14 shifts. And what we're going to see is that technology in these shifts is going to move at an exponential pace. And so what we're seeing now is just the beginning of this change. And the dilemma for these very large companies in the retail business and in the CPG businesses and vendors that provide to them is that you have massive companies with hundreds of thousands of people and millions, if not tens of millions of customers who have to change their behavior at this ever increasing rate. And if you don't keep up with it, then either incumbents that move quickly or new entrants that move even more quickly are going to eat you alive.
Good to hear you. We've all been going, so do feel free to raise your hand or catch my eye if you want to jump in. Paul, on this, follow on from what James just said. I think everybody watching appreciates the point that you have to change or die. The issue is how. And as you suffered supply chain issues during the pandemic, what did you learn about the necessity of changing? And not just we have to change, but what change did you make?
Yeah, so good question. So again, most of the changes that we saw were actually accelerations of effects that were already in place. So the rise of e-commerce, but also don't rule out the rise of the discount channel, which is indeed mostly a brick and mortar business, which is also quite disruptional and requires our supply chains to change as well. So as a result of that, also some of the initiatives we already had, we just had to accelerate. We didn't necessarily have to create new ones, but there was much more urgency to deliver those with speed. And I would say most of them have already been mentioned. I want to point out two in particular that are very important. I would say, first of all, is take out complexity and silos out of your business, because you cannot afford being slowed down by silos in this very fast environment. And the second one, I would say, is customer intimacy. It's now more than ever very important to really stay close to your key customers, understand what they want, and align on plans. The last thing you can use now is unclarity or no alignment in objectives. So I would say those were the two things that were really over-indexed on, and sometimes didn't go that well, but most of the times luckily went pretty well.
Ivan, what changes as you looked at your product and your brand and the way in which you were able to deliver and seeing the changes? What changes do you believe are permanent?
I think everybody's saying it's the speed and agility. And if we look at how we're working differently today than we were 12, 14 months ago, is we've kind of gone from planning and validation to anticipation and reaction. So anticipation by fast sharing, because what's happening in Thailand today could be happening in Peru tomorrow. So trying to anticipate, but also fast reaction to changes. And also knowing that the new state probably isn't going to be a permanent state. And it isn't also a linear state. It could also take 2 steps backwards. So agility was important, now it's critical.
That increases risk, James. If you've got anticipation as opposed to the original validation, but if you're now having to basically go more with a hunch, rather than waiting for the results, that increases risk, James.
It does, but you've just got to build that into how you run your business. You've just got to get into much more test, learn, deploy, and test many, many more things, most of which will fail, and be ready to deploy them very quickly where they work and kill them when they don't. But the industry is coming into a period of another period of extreme disruption, because having had the disruption of last year with COVID, where people stopped eating away from home and started eating at home, which threw two major supply chains up in the air at the same time, the food service and the food retail supply chains. We've now got the reverse process happening. And unlike the pandemic, where it all sort of, it was fairly binary, it went from where it was to almost entirely food retail. This time it's going to be different in different areas and different by different product categories. So the supply chains are going to get extremely noisy. And if people haven't got good forward visibility and lots of technology to help them through this period, it's going to be much more complex coming back the other way than it was going into it.
Sue.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll add to the agility part, right? We're a business that is food service and retail. So, I mean, just imagine the tale of two woes we've had going on. But what we were able to do is break down some silos and really get to shifting. We changed food service supply lines to retail. We were delivering food service products into retail, things that we've never done before. Retailers were very receptive and very collaborative. And so we were able to change things that we haven't been able to change in our process for years. So it's remarkable what a crisis will do to kind of get us thinking differently. And it's just keeping that mindset.
Carrie, if we take as an example, yeah, I'll come to you just 1 second, John. I just want to Carrie first. I just want to follow. 2 years ago, if I'd have suggested that we were going to have a conference and we would all end up on Zoom or vMix or whatever it is, you'd have all said we're mad. We'd have all spent tens of thousands of dollars to arrange to go and all be in the same room at the same time. Now, that is clearly going to reverse a certain amount. But Carrie, I wonder, as taking what Sue just said about the speed of preparedness to adapt, how quickly do we make that permanent?
I think it's a journey we've all started, but I think the themes that you heard from James and Sue are about we have to get to kind of data-informed decisions in retail so we can move faster and mitigate that risk and truly have rapid test and learn environments. So retailers will be in a better position to kind of have this continuous journey. Customer expectations, whether COVID or not, are changing every day, every quarter. And to rise to that occasion, we have to reshape the model in retail, which is much more static and build a store and look at what it looks like. And that's where what you've heard everybody kind of mention these data silos. And as the Google kind of organize the world's information and make it useful, I keep coming back to that. Retail had a history of very siloed data. Marketers had their data, supply chain had their data, and you had to get at this intersection. And that's where a lot of things collapsed in the pandemic. You couldn't get the systems and processes to function. So how do you now bring those together to delight the customer? It's not just at shelf, as we said with Trax, but as they're walking around the store, as they're browsing on Instagram, and really kind of extending brand experience and service. Just as one example, in the pandemic, the customer search behavior for searching for a product in stock near me went up 8,000%. And the number of retailers that could answer that question was very small. But now the customer, in the context of Amazon and others, expects you to be able to put that forward, have an answer, know that you're out of stock, and probably intercept them during their journey and tell them, hey, we'll ship it to you if it's not in the store. So it's one of those constant change. Transformation will be kind of a race of who continues to add to that experience.
James and then Jill.
Yeah, Richard. So for this audience, just building on what was just being said, I think my key message is that there's a little sense that I get within the industry that we've had a crisis year. Everything had to change really quickly. Everybody can now start to breathe a huge sigh of relief, and we can get back to things as normal. The reality is that in 2023, successful retailers and CPGs will have to move twice as quickly as they did in 2020. And in 2025, they'll have to move twice as quickly as they did in 2023. So this requirement to be able to evolve your business and implement new technologies is just going to keep accelerating, because it's accelerating at an exponential rate. It doubles every 2 or 3 years. And the successful companies are going to figure that out, and those that don't are going to be either absorbed by those that do, or they're going to go out of business.
Jill.
I was going to thread the needle between the role of technology to connect buyers and sellers, and then kind of build on the comments around risk and agility. So as we saw these need states changing for consumers and also for retailers, we also started to break down silos very aggressively. So we're always looking at a robust product development pipeline, so that we can enable that commerce between buyers and sellers. What that looked like for us as we were in the midst of the pandemic was massively accelerating the work that we did to put QR codes into our apps, but also to look at things like the need that consumers had as they were financially constrained to launch a product that was in our pipeline around installments. So things like pay in 4, pay in 3 installments, and leveraging our technology and data platform to give almost instant approval for consumers to spread out the payment of those purchases over a series of installments. And so I think, our role as an enabler of commerce is to be in a position to, again, break down those silos, put together agile teams across different functions, product, technology, engineering, marketing, to bring those solutions to bear.
Paul, how do you prevent silos from reforming? First of all, how do you prevent the silo from reforming that Jill's talking about? But also, when do you start choosing between the various omni-channel distribution methods? I mean, I suppose you see which is doing the most business and follow through on that. But when do you start seeing the evidence of that?
Yeah, so, well, I think in this, what makes this transformation very interesting is that it will not be ending. Indeed, it will be accelerating very fast. So, whereas the old operational system was kind of designed to run a machine, that machine will be changing. So you need to create a ecosystem that can cope with both the speed as well as with the change. And many of the ingredients of that already have been mentioned. I would say data, technology, and having an agile mindset are definitely the 3 ones we need to focus on. And where that will lead us, we don't really know. And I think we've been talking a lot about the role of the supply chain and the operational systems, but we also need to think about what the role is that R&D will play. How does this new reality and this new channel landscape reflect in your innovation funnel? Typically, big companies had an innovation funnel that was kind of centered around the brick and mortar stores. But if you dug into channels like e-commerce, but also the value channel, health and beauty channel, etc., that completely requires a restructuring of the way how you organize yourself for innovation as well.
Ivan at Beersdorf, the issue of selecting your priority for distribution within the omni-channel. The resources will go where the business follows is sort of the fundamental concept of the whole idea. How will you determine, what metrics will you determine where the business follows?
I think where the business follows, and our objective, I think, is to make sure our product is available where the shoppers are. So, we have to make sure, and as Paul said about omni-channel, across the different channels, do we have the right product in the general trade store, in a pharmacy store, in a hypermarket, in a discounter? Now, when we prioritize, it's not prioritizing probably between channels, because what we're learning from the crisis is that people are shopping in more channels and in a much more widespread shopping geography. We're prioritizing probably in our own business is ensuring we have the right SKUs. So if there's any prioritization being made, it's prioritizing our top SKUs in the top stores to make sure we have on-shelf ability. And that the one thing, if we talk about going across channels, across silos, is to drive extreme focus, almost a mania, on-shelf availability, which is, I think, the critical thing going forward.
James, are you surprised at the success of things like buy online, pick up in store, those sort of curbside pickup, which were highly useful at a time of pandemic and lockdown where you didn't want to go in the store? But can you see that, despite the survey, which says, X gazillion % say they will continue it, do you believe that that will be a way that people will continue in the future? When you can actually go in the store and we're all vaccinated. I mean, why click online and buy in store, buy online and click in store, whatever. We'll take James, then we'll go to Sue.
Okay.
So, Richard, I think what you're going to see is that the consumer uses technology to get into hybrid behavior. Anything that's heavy, bulky, boring is going to be either pre-ordered or ordered in store and will be done through the buy online pickup outside the store. And then the consumer is going to go in and do the interesting stuff around fresh food and prepared meals and interesting nutritional stuff in the store itself. And I think that different people will have different mixes of those two types of behaviors. But I think that buy online, pick up in store is going to become the dominant form. And I think it'll be driven by the consumer, but also by the industry's economics. Because the reality is that it's very, very expensive to deliver to people's homes. And until we get autonomy coming to a much, much higher level, the consumer isn't prepared to pay $20 to have something delivered to her home. And therefore, the retailers are going to push it towards buy online, pick up in store.
Boy, James, I couldn't agree with you more. And, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that, as Tyson and delivering against fresh meat, we forced people to buy fresh meat online because they had to, right? They didn't like it. Fresh meat, fresh produce, people want to be able to look and feel and pick their best product for their own needs, right? So retailer who gets that right, who gets that deli experience right, will definitely win moving forward. But those are the categories that are going to continue to be purchased in a physical store. And we definitely want to make sure that we're providing that experience with retailers to make sure they want to come into the store.
Carrie, I want to come to you. This is really, forgive me, Carrie. I'm a shopper. I'm a consumer. I'm not a retail expert. I cover the industry, but I'm not a retail expert. But listen, I look back at the last 12 months. I won't buy clothes online. Don't really like doing that, but I will buy the heavy stuff that you've just talked about. I can now divide my shopping very clearly. For the beach house, online, delivered, all the big stuff. Clothes, I'll go up to Macy's or wherever it might be in town and there. Fresh food, I want to touch the vegetables. I want to squeeze the avocados. I don't know whether I'm typical or not, but I wonder how you adapt to somebody like me and 100 million versions of me.
That's a perfect call out, because what we're all focused on in this business is understanding the customer journey. As an individual, you may have very different journey types for these different product categories that you mentioned. And I think what's interesting about what you call out, there's two opportunities. There's making sure you can meet all those different scenarios you just gave as examples. But we're also doing, from a technology standpoint, and some of the innovation that Google Cloud is working on, is some of your desire not to buy clothes online or not to purchase fresh food online comes from a lack of quality in that experience. You can't tangibly touch the product. You can't tell how it fits. You don't have all the information that you can gather in a sensory way in store. There's also just the environment and the experience that's important to customers. Technology is now heavily working on closing that gap of how do you address fit online? How do you actually kind of have vision recognition of freshness of the fruit, and to give those signals to the customer so that it removes some of the friction that's currently in the experience. And then I think, as James described, there's always going to be things that kind of the broader experience becomes important. But how do you kind of streamline all the steps and research that happens for a consumer and continue to make that journey more delightful, take the work out of it, and evolve how people think? So we've seen big changes in all these categories this year. You know, people said, I'd never buy this category online. And I'll just say beginning to change how people think.
All right, but Jill, let's stay real with this. Forgive me, I'm going to move my camera. Over there, outside, there is West Side Market in New York City, right? It is 5 minutes away, less than. So why did I buy a dozen bounties online from Amazon to be delivered with all the costs and implications and environmentally unfriendly? You shoot me down for being unfriendly. We'll take Jill and then to James. That is the bricks and mortar challenge, even though the research shows people want to go back online, people want to go back into the store.
So I loved what James said. I mean, I think we're compartmentalizing this, and we'll continue to see trends and evolutions in that. I think for a technology platform like ours, it's meeting the consumer and the merchant where they are and providing choice. I think so much of this will also be influenced by the consumer's financial needs, and that's where a lot of our focus comes into play. Like, what is the role of access to cash, new ways of paying? How do they use credit for certain purchases? As you were showing me outside your window, I thought maybe you were going to show me some food trucks. I was wondering where we were going, but as we see different types of retail popping up, it's really for us around enabling all kinds of acceptance and different ways for consumers to pay within those environments. And I think that consumers are wanting to get back into the physical world for the things that are experiential.
All right. So the food trucks, by the way, they're that way. They park on 17th Street. The whole of Fresh takes up the entire 17th Street.
So they've been a huge focus for us. Like, that has been a category that has embraced digital through the pandemic. So they have been able to, print out a QR code, slap it on their food truck, and now consumers can pay in a contactless cash way, safe and simple.
Right. But I'm just going to stick with you for 1 second, then we'll come to Paul and to Ivan. But Jill, just stick with you for a second. Are you, tough on this, are you agnostic about the distribution channel? At the end of the day, if you pay online via PayPal, or if you've now perfected your technique of paying, by phone or by PayPal credit card or whatever, debit card, whatever it is, are you agnostic on the channel that's used?
We're all about choice, convenience, safety, and security. So it's understanding the needs of our consumers and the merchants and providing them with new solutions. So this idea of installments, as retailers were facing headwinds on consumers who were financially constrained, helping them to just, through, the flip of a digital switch to be able to help consumers have more control and flexibility was a need state that they had to increase their turnover. It's choice and solutions to facilitate all kinds of commerce.
I'm going to say that you're agnostic then, that where the consumer goes, and this is really significant, because where the consumer goes, you will follow. But what I'm trying to understand is, what I'm trying to get to is focusing on bricks and mortar, focusing on retailers with large boxes and spaces. What do they need to do? If you like, they've got their omni-channel, they've got their online, and they've got their click and deliver, and all, but to get people back in the store and improve the experience, what do they need to do?
Yeah, I mean, Richard, the customer generally flows to things that are some bundle of either better for them, simpler and more convenient, or cheaper. And so most innovations that win with consumers are delivering against one or more of those. And so I think what you're going to see emerging is that this technology is going to enable people to make innovations that deliver some form of better or simpler or cheaper to the consumer, and then consumers are going to be led, in that direction. So if you take your example of the Bounty towel, I don't think that many people believe that purchasing paper towels is, an engaged, enthusiastic purchase for them. So if somebody manages to automate that, so that there's an auto replenishment function inside of your home automation, and then somebody else manages to deliver it direct to the home at a cheaper price, then that's going to win for that product category over time. It will be a whole different purchase behavior buying ties in Macy's. Somebody's got to think about how they make that either better, simpler, and or cheaper for you in order for you to change your behavior.
On the continuum scale, oh yes, go ahead, Sue. You're muted. You're muted, Sue.
This is my sign for I'm on mute. Sorry about that. Geez. And I had something really good to say too. So what I was going to pile on is that to get people back to physical stores, we need to provide meal solutions and ways to make the shopping easier and to inspire shoppers, right? That's the way to get them back in. And so, price and value will always, be key, but it's differentiating with solutions and ways to make their life simple.
As we come to the end of this discussion, and I'm going to draw some strands together, and then we'll take the fireside chat, and we'll then have some questions. I want to pull some strands together because you've all pretty much agreed on this. The last 12, 14 months have accelerated trends that were already there. That bricks and mortar needs to, where we're better, cheaper, simpler, it needs to add the value to it. Now, Ivan, starting with you, what is the way in which, I mean, the traditional retailer is now trying to learn new tricks. Can they do it?
I think firstly, and I agree with James, is what were they great at? Proximity stores were great at convenience, so they need to play on that. Pharmacies are great at trust and credibility. They need to play on that. As everybody said, grocery, it's about freshness and choice. So I think they need to double down on their reason for being, but they need to leverage technology, make sure they become even better on those positions of strength, and make sure they are the most convenient, the most fresh, the most trustworthy, and also, remove error. Make sure that people are not disappointed when they come into store, because the permission for failure from the shopper has disappeared because they have an alternative on their phone, which can be replaced the retailer overnight.
And Carrie, the ability for the online and physical retailer to use data to monitor that failure or success has become premium.
It's the top focus of everyone, and then turning that data into actual insights that changes your action, whether that's what you're merchandising, what your promotion is, how you're communicating and interacting with that customer. I think we've talked omni in store. The only other thing I'd call out is just in the customer's mind, they're interacting with us in a channel-less way. They go to where James said, what's better, simpler, cheaper. And in a lot of categories like grocery, frankly, digital is a hard experience, and so people are naturally going to migrate back. So you're going to see these flows of customers and people driving innovation to address what those friction points are, whether it's in digital or that store experience.
To you, Jill, do you see yourself as following the trend as a payment mechanism? Are you following the trends, or are you leading them?
We're really looking to anticipate and lead the trends. We launched functionality around crypto, right? Buy, sell, hold. What does it mean to eventually use that kind of currency to shop? So we're thinking ahead around, what are the new technologies? What are the jobs to be done for consumers to take the stress out of how they conduct their financial, everything within their financial world.
Just a quick question to the whole panel. Just raise your hand like that. Has anybody used crypto to buy something? I can't help feeling that we all will one day, but we're not there yet. To you, Ivan, this idea of you've got you're the manufacturer, you're the product, you're deciding where it's going and where the channels of distribution are. From your perspective, what happens next?
I think, well, firstly, I think we don't decide where it goes. The shoppers decide where they're going to shop, and the assumptions we had yesterday don't exist.
Sorry, I didn't realize you. Carry on, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
So we have to react, anticipate where the shoppers are. So I think that the whole thing, what happens next, is how do we leverage technology so we know where we're executing in store to the standards we expect, and what are the gaps versus our standards so we can close those.
To you, Paul, you're nodding, which is good.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting now is that you see what trends are here to stay and will even grow further, and you have to double down on those. Where at the same time, you also need to keep scanning what else will be emerging and organize yourself in such a way that you're indeed quick to answer to those trends. And big companies like ours will not maybe always be the first pioneers, but we do need to decide when we see something is here to stay, that we double down on it and be successful before, indeed, as James pointed out earlier, our competitors will, or new entrants will.
And to you, Sue, you said earlier about the direct distribution to retailers was something you did because you had to. You learned how to do it fast. Is it something you would continue when other channels, when the traditional ones come back? And how do you keep alive that innovative Dunkirk spirit that you just had to have?
Yeah, we talk about that a lot as an organization because we're big, right? Similar to Unilever and some of these other folks. So staying nimble and staying closely connected and act like we are in crisis mode is going to be really key for us moving forward. And we've started to think through how we put our customer first and how we have more folks in our organization connected to the customer, which we think customer being retailer or food service operator, and in that perspective, that customer, we think that will really help us stay closer to the business. So that's one area that we're working on moving forward. But you're right, it's gonna be all of us on deck, calling each other, holding each other accountable for making sure that we can keep moving with speed and do the right things.
James, before we go to the fireside chat, take what you've just heard and give me a reason of optimism that the majority of retailers will get this right.
I think retailers are, because it's such a Darwinian industry, retailers are very good at adapting very quickly. And when they come under periods of intense stress, they react much more effectively than they do in normal times. Actually, we see this whenever there's a hurricane. Whenever you get some sort of crisis, the business sort of moves into a whole different state to be able to move quickly. And what retailers have got to learn how to do is to do that in normal state. That's got to be how they behave all the time without exhausting the teams, because there are massive shifts coming. I mean, if you just look at the Food Retail Ventures portfolio, it's structured around these challenges. We waste 40% of the food that we produce. That's just diabolical. We now have the technology to be able to solve for that. We need to do it. We've invented this thing called grocery online. The dirty secret is that grocery online hemorrhages money. So retailers have now got 15% of their business flowing through a channel that loses 15% profit. How are they going to resolve that? We've got many, many more costs in terms of people, whether it's the $15 wage hour or inefficiencies due to people having to behave around COVID. How are we going to use AI and other technologies to improve productivity? And then there's a whole suite of technologies to enable us to assort the stores, to price the stores, to promote the stores, and to deliver the supply chains that are efficient because of great demand forecasting all the way up the supply chain. All of that today, the optimism is all of that today. I can name you companies that I've invested in that are doing those things, and I could tell you 2 or 3 companies for most of those areas that are competing with them. The question is, how do the big vendors and the big retailers get into this now in a much more meaningful way and start to test, learn, and adopt these practices, because they're going to need them. Q3 and Q4 this year is going to be tremendously painful for the food retail industry, because everybody's going to go and eat out at home because they can for the first time in a year. And that is going to leave the retailers with enormous costs and without the benefit of this, unplanned huge lump of volume we had in 2020. That's going to be a massive pain that hopefully will catalyze the industry into learning how to do this as a present state ongoing.
Exist in a perpetual state of crisis, even when normality is good. Stay with us, all members of the panel. Stay with us, please, because we have a lot of questions coming in. But Jennifer, I want to throw it back to you to continue. We will have our Q&A before we finish, but I invite Jennifer to return.
Thanks, Richard, and thank you to our panelists. That was an incredible discussion. I heard some amazing insights, around agility is critical, speed to insights is critical, and finally, test, deploy, learn over and over again. Now we'd like to turn to our audience with a couple of poll questions just to get your feedback and your insight as we move forward and switch over to the fireside chat between Richard and Justin. So if you'll look in the widget on your screen, you'll see polling questions, and we're going to move forward with those. So the first one should be up on your screen now about digital solutions. Please answer if you feel like it. And we'll give just a couple of seconds here for the audience to be able to answer in on that, and you'll be able to see the overall results right on your screen. I think we can move to the second question that we have on polling as we're switching over to the fireside chat. Okay, the second question is, I feel confident in my company's adoption of digital technology in retail. So please answer on your screen. It's like at the moment, most people feel that their adoption of digital technology for retail is meeting expectations. So let's move on to the third question. Who is responsible for implementing new technologies in your organization? And this would be specifically, around retail and your manufacturing. We have Chief Digital Officer winning at the moment. Not Clear and Complicated is now the leader. We'll move forward with just a quick commercial break from Trax as we move into the fireside chat, and then we'll start an immediate in-depth chat with Justin Bihar, Trax CEO, and back again to Richard Quest. Thank you.
We're transforming today's retail from the one place it counts most, the shelf, ensuring that the right product is always at the right place, at the right time, at the right price. With the Trax platform, we've taken the power of our computer vision, AI, and advanced hardware and combined it with our on-demand workforce to better enable brands, retailers, and shoppers to take smart actions in store and navigate this new frontier. Welcome to the rebirth of retail with Trax.
And so to our fireside chat with Justin Bihar, the CEO to Trax. Justin, the one thing that I took away, particularly from the discussion, is the immediacy of this, some would say, crisis in retailing, disruption, if you will. How much is it upon us, and how quickly is it moving?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it truly is here now, and if the COVID more so than anything has accelerated even more, where the timing and need for retailers and brands to act now. In some ways, you can look. The industry has been trying for a decade plus to be gearing up for this transformation. They've always been investing in technology. If you look at brands, for an example, they have been investing in data and technology for a number of years. In the last 5 to 7 years, they have all launched or been recruiting for transformation officers or chief transformation officers because of this gearing pressure that they see happening in the way shoppers are changing the way they want it, where they will discover and interact with their products. Same thing for retailers.
to jump in,
Yeah.
this phrase that we hear, the omni-channel, does it mean all things to all people? Is there a synthesis of omni-channel that retailers can grasp onto?
You know, I mean, it is an expectation that, in some sense, it's an expectation that you have to be able to engage with shoppers and assume that they will engage with you through many different means as part of their journey. So, gone are the days where shopping is a single event of visiting the store, browsing, buying, paying, collecting, and then leaving. And instead, now it's a world where they start interacting with you on their mobile device. They then look at the website when they're at home, then put things in the cart. They then visit the store. And you really have to be able to dynamically respond to that and assume that they want a consistency of that experience that allows them to shop the way they want to shop. And so it's being able to be responsive and ready for all of those. And that requires, in a lot of ways, that's gotten easier, or the competitive landscape has made it even harder for retailers now and brands. The cost of innovation has gone down dramatically. So anybody can open an online retail store. Everyone has gotten dramatically better at targeting the right shoppers they want to target. These trends of contract manufacturing now makes it easier for people to bring products to market that are laser focused on specific customer segments that they would have never been able to reach before, and to reach them on a direct to consumer basis or through various online footprints.
But is there a contradiction in the statistics, in a sense, between the shopper? We heard that the shoppers still say that most shopping will be done in store. But at the same time, we see this tremendous growth in online shopping. So at what point, if you like, does the two overlap and one take over from the other, if indeed it does?
Yeah, I think it'll be channel and product specific. So there are clearly some cases where we've already seen this, where online has become the dominant, where people want to shop first through an online for some of the kind of higher ticket consumer electronics and related devices, or related kind of consumer systems. But in the world of grocery and in the world of consumer packaged goods, I think it'll be much more fluid of people moving in firms. So I think people will visit stores and they will engage and have experiences with products, as they go, because in grocery, access to things like perishables and new food and vegetables, that always is going to be part of the core experience. And even there'll be richer experiences in stores for how to learn new ways to cook with those or new recipes. And I think what we'll see is a case where people experience those in store. They may buy while they're in store through their digital, through their mobile application. It may be in their cars when they drive away, or it may simply be delivered to their home. So the world of what's online and digital versus what's physical, I think, will be much more blended, over the next decade.
The buy online, pick up in store, the click and collect, which you say is the great new way and is here to stay. What's the advantage of it, and what's the risk for the bricks and mortar retailer who doesn't have something better or something enticing when you go and pick it up?
Yeah. I mean, it's a new trend, and I think in a lot of ways the brands are the ones that have to be most concerned about it, because you're buying online. So the opportunity for a retailer to guide you to a substitution, to a different product from the brand, to a private label, to another brand, when you're at that moment of adding it to your cart, is much easier than when you're standing in front of the shelf. So it becomes critical for brands to look at how they establish, in a world where all of us are buying online and picking up in store or getting things delivered. It really puts a huge onus on the brands to think about how they can engage with you and develop first-party relationships and direct relationships. And for the retailer, it's really taking advantage of those stores which they have, which are really in a lot of ways also distribution centers for us to take advantage of that speed so that you can find the things that you want quickly and you can get them to your home quickly, whether that's on the way home from work or whether that's getting someone to deliver it. So that's a key competitive advantage for the world of physical retail today. It only raises the bar for why, if they haven't digitized all of the infrastructure around their stores so that they have a minute by minute understanding of what's in store at any time, then they lose the advantage, or they lose that opportunity or event to crystallize that, to get it into your cart, to drive that basket value. So it's going to be really important that they make these investments now and that they get to the scale needed to assume that this is going to be, assumed primary default behavior that shoppers have going forward, the norm, as it were.
So let's take what you've just said. It's going to be really important that they get it, if you like. Would you go as far as to say it is an existential threat if you don't?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there has been a transformation in the market where the digital disruptors of Amazon, Alibaba, and others are coming on strong, and they're not just digital anymore. You look across the planet, across the US with Amazon and Whole Foods, or in the US stores that Alibaba have, in the China stores that Alibaba has, but increasing trend, they're coming into physical because they know those stores offer something unique. But it's about using those stores to create a unique experience that's very digitally native and immersed in that kind of omni-channel experience. And the traditional retailers, despite the fact that they are, or physical retailers, have been growing their online, thinking in this omni-channel world and thinking about how to build those stores or redevelop those stores to support that omni-channel experience, they're behind. And so, to the degree they do not innovate, have a strategy to bring together key leaders in their organization to act outside of the traditional silo functions, but instead, big mandates to move parts of their business, it is an existential threat for them, because this is the time. They have a time advantage now of those physical stores. Proximity to shoppers, they will not have that, 5 years from now.
Justin, thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Justin, for diving a little bit deeper and specifically outlining the urgency of adopting digital technology in order to be disruptors in the industry. Now we're going to move on to a live Q&A session. So again, please use the widget to submit any Q&A questions that you have, and Richard will begin. Thank you.
About 10 or 15 minutes remaining, and what I want to do, we're going to do in a sort of quick fire if we can. Justin's joined us. I'll throw the question to individuals, but if any of you really feel that this is one that you all have a burning desire, hand up, wave away, and we go. Starting with you, I think this is one for you, Paul. Will CPGs continue with dedicated reps visiting large format modern trade stores when the growth is all, as you said, proximity or e-commerce channels? Paul.
The answer is yes, but not to the extent that we will be doing that now. I think we need to be very clear what a physical visit brings, but also what it doesn't bring. So I think if you understand what type of activities require a physical connect with the store, but what kind of activities can be replaced by, for instance, being much more data of technology driven, not only will that lead to a much bigger reach of the stores that we can work with, but also will it lead to much deeper connections to the store, because the interactions that you will have with the store will be much more meaningful and less related to transactional or auditing activities. So yes, they will
Right,
stay,
but
but they will become much more meaningful.
Ivan, related to that, is now a time for a game-changing step change. It comes in a question: in-store camera technology to measure the KPIs, to measure things instead of those visits using technology.
I think it's a hybrid between the two. Is certainly for emerging markets, there's still a high degree of what we call span of control. There's a lot you can do at store level, and it's more, at least from our side, we will continue to have the physical visits because yes, there's the switch, but still hypermarkets, supermarkets will still be the dominant channel for the next few years. And it's how we leverage technology with our field force. So yes, still have arms and legs going to the store, but have those arms and legs supported by technology.
Question to Carrie first. Carrie, we've heard from everybody about speed and test. Retailers, this is not me saying this is a question, retailers are very slow to adopt new technology. Well, let's not, I mean, you by all means question whether you agree with that, but why is the question?
Yeah, I think it touches on some of the themes we mentioned earlier of just wanting to get a good test and seeing it over a period and understanding different product categories can lead to moving slow and a lack of trust of the data and the actual insight you're getting from it. So as we just really briefly touched on AI and machine learning, this is an example where you have to have kind of a culture and a team that's leaning into this, because otherwise you will always question kind of what the machine learning answer is, and it will lead you to moving more slowly. So kind of evolving where people are at so they can truly do AI and ML-based machine learning and take the human out of the loop. So these are often things that have been kind of storied jobs, you know, the merchant retail are very important. And how do you start using technology? So it's historically in the past, retail has been a risk averse. The stakes are high, investment is tight, capital and expense inside a retailer's P&L is a struggle. They're making hard trade-offs. And so you can't afford to make a wrong move. But I think as James said earlier, you can't afford to not be doing rapid test and learn. So we're really seeing a lot of the more mature organizations up their capabilities in this space. And the only other thing I wanted to call out earlier that Justin mentioned, just in this dynamic of brands taking control of direct interactions and kind of digital changing the way they can interact with consumers. The other thing I put in everybody's mind is also, I think we're about to see a big shift in how retailers and CPG interact. So data exchanges and media platforms between the two. So what exists today is not good. It's not good for the CPG product side of the house and not for the end consumer. So it is hard to move increasingly direct to the customer, and many of you have already experienced that. But I think we're going to break down some of the data walls and barriers that have kept retail and CPG from providing the best experience.
Justin, for you, before COVID, we expected 20 to 30% of retailers to be e-commerce by 2025. Well, that number's obviously gone out the window. What is now your accurate prediction on where we expect retailer sales, the percentage to be, e-commerce?
I think you have to look at that within specific verticals, right? So, I mean, in grocery and retail, or the categories that the folks on this call and probably those participating are most focused on is grocery and hypermarket. And I think in that right now, we're seeing the numbers settle into kind of the teens potentially. And I think that we'll see acceleration that puts that up into the 20, 25% over the next couple of years on a consistent basis. How quickly it grows after that and what that rate looks like, I don't know if we have a crystal ball on it yet, other than know that it's going to be more than we expected sooner than we expected.
You're on mute, Richard.
I've always said, we're going to go to our graves. Somebody going. James, what grocery food tech trends do you think will impact 10 years from now. Now, I promise you we are recording and we will use it in evidence against you in the future.
10 years from now, I think you're going to have a whole bunch of technologies that people aren't even focused on today. 3D printing is moving very, very rapidly. Will we see 3D printed food? The use of robots, the use of avatars. The single biggest shift that's going to hit us probably in that time horizon is the advent and deployment of the brain-computer interface. So everybody today, we're trying to figure out how to use the smartphone to help us to do commerce. And the reality is that the brain will directly link with the cloud, and we'll be doing it, in that way. And today's generations that are native to the phone will be struggling like, many of us were struggling when it first came out with the touchscreen. So I think there's going to be a whole bunch of technologies that are only just starting to emerge that will be the things we're talking about if we did this call in 2031.
Which I hope we will, and we'll all still be around, please God, to do it. Then, a final question to each of to Sue. When all is said and done, what have you taken away from what you've been through professionally in your business in the last year?
Oh boy, we don't have another hour, do we? But I think what we've taken away is for our function and for our business. So, we're all about partnering with retailers on insights. That's my function, right? So what we learned during this time is that we are more relevant than ever. And it goes back to a lot of our questions around data and data integration and the disparate data. But we really proved our value when resets and category reviews and line reviews were all on hold and supply was a problem. We came in with insights and really value-added foot traffic data and things to help our business move forward. So that's one of the benefits, I think, of sticky behavior moving forward for us. And for the business, I think we're seeing some really interesting shopper and consumer shifts that are really going to be, I think, hugely successful for our business, right? People know how to cook food, right? That's maybe fatigue, but they certainly are cooking food more often than not. That's going to help us all in the food and retail business.
I want to finish, Jill. Just listening to that, did you have a COVID project that you did? I bought myself an espresso machine, a proper one with levers and pulleys and things, and was determined to learned how to make a decent espresso. What was yours? Did you bake? Did you cook? Did you garden? What was yours?
Lots of cooking. And we also did the espresso thing. There was a late night wine-induced Williams Sonoma purchase for a hefty espresso machine sitting on the counter. We've gotten pretty good, but I will say I wept last Mother's Day when my daughter brought me a Starbucks coffee in a to-go cup.
Thank you, one and all. Before we finish, I'll have some closing remarks. Is there anything anybody wants to add before I wrap it up with a few thoughts? Put your hand up if there's anything you feel you've missed, you've not said, you want to say. Going once, going twice. There you are. That's what you want to hear. Thank you to our panel for joining us, and allow me to give you some closing thoughts on where we are. I came to this discussion and to this panel as a business expert who's covered the retail economy. And that means the bottom line, the ways and wherefores, who was succeeding, who's in chapter 11, the new trends. I was not a retail expert per se in the methods that we've talked about today, but what I've seen and what I've heard, and we've brought to you quite clearly and very deliberately, you've heard from the payment sector. You've heard from the data sector. You've heard from the packaged goods sector. You've heard from Trax. You've heard from manufacturers. You've heard it put together. And these are the people that provide the product, that provide the information, that provide the wherewithal by which you make the sale. And what you've heard, of course, is the acceleration that continued as a result of COVID was really something that was already underway. But before it was underway, you had time. You could monitor what the competition was doing and you had time to make a mistake. And testing was desirable, arguably necessary, but it could be done in your own time. Well, what you've heard today, of course, is the acceleration that's taken place. I think we'll all go away with James's better, cheaper, simpler. My bounty is better, cheaper, simpler to be delivered to the beach online, and I'm not schlepping it on the ferry. My clothes is better because I want to touch and feel. I want to go and have a look. But how are you going to give me that experience? And you will only know that experience because you'll have the pay data from PayPal. You'll have the shoppers data from Google. And it is what Sue really said. It is the ability, as James pointed out and went further, to live in a moment, to recognize what you've had to do. To those who weren't doing click online, buy online, pick up in store, who are now doing it and now have to integrate it, but then improve the experience. Offer me something more. Otherwise, frankly, it's all there. What are you going to offer me that's better than me just buying it here? How are you going to get me going back over there instead of just over there? And that's what you need to think about, because as James said, the time is now. There is an urgency. Justin summed it up. It is an existential crisis. The Darwinian nature of retailing, which has always seen some stores go, some stores stay, some succeed, others don't. But the acceleration of somebody else eating your lunch is phenomenal. And so that's where I leave you. We hope at Trax that we've given you knew that there was a crisis on your doorstep and you knew it was going to require urgent information. But you've heard the experts tell you what they have done right the way to the end, the things that have worked, the way in which Tyson's preventing silos rebuilding, how Unilever is going to be more targeted in the people that they send, the KPIs monitoring of Beiersdorf, the way Google is refining its data, what James is looking to invest in the future, and how Trax pulls it all together for you. And that's why we're grateful that you took the time to be with us today. I'm Richard Quest in New York. Whether I'm buying Bounty or ties, cauliflowers or cucumbers, we know we will be shopping. Whatever you're up to, I hope it's profitable. Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you to our audience and thank you to our panelists as well. We will be sending out a recording of this and a survey as well. We also have some materials available for you to read and research further. And again, please reach out to us anytime with any future questions. If we did not get to your questions, we will reach back out and you can reach us at traxretail.com. Thank you so much for your time today.